I'm Olivia Otieno. This is Double O Direct, woman host, music by women artists. Right. And I'm dressed by a different woman in fashion every single week. Thank you so much to Angel. The brand is Kokio_label. Find them on Instagram. And remember that today we mark World Autism Day. And autism has been associated with stigma. It's been associated with ignorance, a lack of resources, even to diagnose, treat, even manage the condition. I am now hosting 4 women, Sanai Payne Timama, Pooja Panesar, Dr. Josephine Arasa, and Dr. Susan Wamithi. 4 women who are helping to shed light on what autism is, how it can be diagnosed, and what, if any, treatment options are available. Ladies, welcome to Double O Direct.
Hi, Olivia. How are you doing?
Fantastic.
I'm Sanai Payne Timama, better known nowadays as Mama Kalel, and founder of the Kalel program. It is an applied behavior analysis therapy training program in conjunction with the USIU and the University of Nevada in Reno. We founded the program because we realized that children in Kenya do not have access to ABA services, well, not as easily as most children outside of the country. And so the thing that we decided to do was to make sure that we can get therapy available to children with autism and on the spectrum and make it available widely to as many people and as many families and as many children who need it. And also to change the stigma from negative to very positive when it comes to autism. Autistic kids are excellent. They're awesome, they're loving, they're kind, and every one of them is totally unique, and all you need to do is get to know them. They're absolutely amazing kids.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Sanaipe. Dr. Wamithi.
I am Dr. Wamithi, and I'm a developmental pediatrician at the Aga Khan University Hospital in Nairobi. And my role is to help children with special needs to achieve their developmental potential, and especially for children who have autism spectrum disorder. Our role is just to help them with their functioning so they can be everything that they were created to be.
I love it. I love it. Great work happening at USIU. Great work happening at the Aga Khan University Hospital. Welcome back, one of my favorite women, one of my former lecturers, a woman I admire, Professor Josephine Arasa. Welcome to Double O Direct.
Thank you. I'm Josephine Arasa, an associate professor of psychology from United States International University. And I'm here today because the Department of Psychology has partnered with a university in the US, University of Nevada, Reno, so that we can start a program to help support parents and other caregivers who have children with ASD. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Pooja Panesar.
Hi, Olivia. How are you?
Great.
So my name is Pooja Panesar. I'm a board-certified behavior analyst. Lots of words. What does it mean? It means that I supervise applied behavior analysis. I teach it. I do the therapies, and I supervise the therapists who do that. I'm also working on my PhD in behavior medicine at the moment. I am one of the directors and founders of Kaizora in Kenya and in Tanzania, where we provide applied behavior analysis, occupational therapy, speech therapy, the whole range of therapies for children with developmental delays. And I'm also on the international committee of one of the international boards for applied behavior analysis, and accredited for teaching the courses. In the past, we've also done a lot of awareness and a lot of fundraising for events to create awareness and free things so that just to help with the situation, because like you said, the stigma, the awareness, the acceptance, a lot is still needed.
Love it. Pooja, Professor, Dr. Sanaipe. These are 4 amazing women, and on our socials today, SpiceFM KE, the question is, have you been impacted? Have you been affected by autism? Either personally or through somebody you know. Let us know at SpiceFM KE.
Spice.
I'm Olivia Otieno. This is Double O Direct, a safe space for all women every Saturday from 10 a.m. Coming up, got some JoJo, got some Amory, but today we mark World Autism Day. Autism is a condition. It has been associated with stigma. It has been associated with ignorance. There are a lack of resources to diagnose, treat, or simply manage the condition. And please, if you have been affected by autism or somebody close to you, SpiceFM KE on social media. Let us know what your experience has been. In the interlude, Sanaipe, you mentioned that why is there always the word stigma? Why is there always that negative association with regards to autism? I don't know. Why? Why is that?
I'm actually asking the question myself because negative connotations actually have nothing to do with the child. Okay, the idea of autism may be scary to a lot of people, and any condition is scary.
Yes.
Regardless. I mean, even diabetes is scary. But at the end of the day, just because somebody has been diagnosed as being on the spectrum, you do realize there's Bill Gates is on the spectrum. There's Elon Musk is on the spectrum.
I knew Elon Musk must be on the
Yes.
spectrum. He's
I mean, the most Darwin is on the
Yes,
spectrum.
yes.
Albert Einstein is on the spectrum. These are amazing individuals
Yes.
with brain power that could basically, change the world.
They're savants.
And they're savants, and they have changed the world. So when you say somebody has autism, they are actually an exceptional human being. You just have to find that talent that is within them, that unique talent. And let me tell you, that child will go so far beyond Kenya, beyond Africa, into the world, and make a name for themselves.
Pooja Panesa, tell me about the work you do and the organization you started, right? And how you are working with regards to awareness and diagnosis of autism.
So I started Kaizora in 2009, but I've been in the field of autism for over 17 years now. Started work in Canada and continued when I moved back home here. So through the center, it initially started with just consulting and ABA on its own, and it's evolved into this fully fledged offering all the services. That's basically it. In terms of awareness, I started Autism Awareness Kenya with a colleague in 2010. So we used to have monthly events, annual events, all kinds of events throughout the years, bringing parents together to see exactly the perspective that Sanaipe is talking about, because that is how you need to visualize your child for them to also succeed. So we've done a lot of awareness through there, and then we also have a foundation. So through the foundation, we're going to rural areas and other counties where we can spread the word and create some awareness there, because there are a lot of myths and misconceptions around
What
autism.
are some of those myths and misconceptions?
Wow, there's so many. One is black magic is a common one.
Okay.
That something has happened. There's spiritual misconceptions around it. I've heard the mother's dowry has not been paid, or the mother was cursed. That's why they've had a child like this. And these lead to treatments that are not okay, because when you believe that that is what the cause is, then the treatment is an exorcism. The treatment is traditional herbs and medicines. which
General
sometimes-
quackery. We'll label it as
Yeah,
general quackery. So
exactly.
what exactly, when you talk about the spectrum,
Yes.
what is the range like?
It's huge. It starts from me and you. So the spectrum is, if you look at what we call neurotypical people,
Yes.
you'll find people who have autistic traits anywhere. I like things a certain way, or I like some things repeated, or I have difficulty making friends all the time or speaking. Those are all different personality traits. Now, when you come along the spectrum, you get to a point where these traits now make daily living a little bit more difficult. And that is where you get into a diagnostic area, where
Yes.
it starts making the daily living difficult.
Yes.
And those communication, behavioral difficulties can go as far as, a child who is mostly spending time on their own. They're having behavioral difficulties. They're not communicating. They're not yet speaking. So you get the whole range.
Dr. Susan, tell me about the work that you do as a pediatrician with the diagnoses and the treatment or management of autism.
So as a developmental pediatrician, when a patient comes in, the parents don't know what's going on with the child.
Yes.
So my job is to make the diagnosis, look at how it's impacting their functioning, as Pooja has said, and come up with a plan to help with the individualized condition that comes in. So
As a developmental
Yeah.
pediatrician, a professional that all parents should visit, or is it only when I think perhaps maybe there are traits or behaviors that I feel are not hitting those milestones that we were told to look out for?
So yes, so for any delays in overall development in the 5 domains, whether it's your cognitive, your social emotional, your language, your gross motor skills, or your fine motor skills,
Yes.
if there are any delays in those domains which are driven by the brain, that's when I come in.
Yes.
But now today we're focusing on the autism spectrum disorder. We're looking at deficits or challenges with social communication and relationships and understanding those relationships, and looking at any restricted and repetitive behaviors that are actually actually impairing on the functioning. As Pooja said, we're all on a spectrum somewhere, but is there an impairment that's causing the child's functioning in the home setting, functioning in the school setting? If they're having challenges with feeding, my job is to help with those challenges so they can go along and become what they're supposed to be. As the examples that Sanaipe has given, is for them to maximize and identify what is their gift and work on that gift so they can contribute as everyone else is working towards their individual goals.
Sanaipe, you've developed a program. Can you talk me through the journey of motherhood, diagnoses, all the way now to developing the Khalil program?
It was quite a long journey. People think 2 years is actually a short time, but when you're trying to figure out what's going on, it's actually quite a long time. Khalil was born normally, normal birth, normal pregnancy, but just when he was about 18 months old, I realized that he wasn't talking yet, he wasn't feeding properly, he wasn't sleeping properly. So I thought maybe it was a sleeping and feeding issue.
Yes.
So went to England. Saw a feeding therapist and a sleep therapist. And after a week of working with Khalil, nothing had really changed. So they said to me, they think that, there's probably a bigger issue here. So they referred me to a developmental pediatrician. So I went back to England, saw one, and, she did a 2-hour assessment and she said, yes, she definitely thinks Khalil is on the spectrum.
After 2 hours?
Yes.
Okay.
Because as with Dr. Wamithi, they're really well trained on how to spot the signs of autism.
Why did it take you having to go to England?
Because I didn't know of any doctors here.
We were talking, but at first you thought it was perhaps sleep, perhaps feeding.
Yes, we don't have feeding therapists here, nor do we have sleep trainers. All right. And second of all, in Kenya, one of the things is you have a nanny, you have your parents around, and and it's your first child. They tell you, don't worry, he'll end up sleeping. Don't worry, he'll end up eating. Every child is different. Boys talk later. That kind of stuff.
Exactly.
So for me, I wasn't even worried about the speaking aspect. I thought, okay, fine. Kids don't speak until they're 4. That's okay. I've seen it happen with one of my nephews. But the feeding was really getting to me because, he was only still eating pureed food and we were still waking up every 2-3 hours at night and all of that stuff. So that wasn't working for me. So when I looked around here, I didn't see any of the therapists available or any of the therapies available. So we got on a plane, we went to England, and obviously we found them there. We saw them. They worked with them for a week. There was no difference. So when we went to see the pediatric neurologist, they actually have tests that they do, and they can tell how far along the spectrum they are. Luckily for us, Khalil is not so badly off. All right. And like we saw on the Saturday, she had Khalil in a therapy center on the Monday. And when we got there, he was the youngest person there. And, he had a blast. They had a room out for him. They had toys. They had everything. So he was doing speech, ABA, and OT for 30 minutes each.
Please tell me, what is speech, AB, and OT?
Oh, my God. Okay, so speech therapy. All right, so where they teach you how to speak. OT is where they teach you occupational therapy. So they teach you about gross motor skills, fine motor skills, basically everyday living, and then applied behavioral therapy. So obviously they're trying to stop you from doing the bad behaviors. There's things like stimming, there's things like rocking, there's things that, children with autism do to cope with certain situations that are obviously not...
Toe walking.
Yeah, those kind of things. And then, rocking back and forth sometimes. And when they get themselves into a situation, sometimes they hit their head or they cover their ears when they're overwhelmed. So it's just teaching them that that's not the way to do things. This is how to tolerate. So also tolerance. So we were doing this every day for 3 months.
Yes.
So when we came back to Kenya, there was nothing of the sort available. Not that I knew of anyway. So my pediatrician finally sent me to see Dr. Wamithi. Went to see Dr. Wamithi, and I was looking for therapists. So eventually I called my doctor in England and she referred me to a therapy center in South Africa.
Oh, wow.
They wanted me to go to South Africa.
Yeah, okay.
But I was like, no, I'm not relocating because I've still got to work.
To actually move there, to live.
Yes, a lot of families have. Kenyan families move. Kenyan families have moved to South Africa. Kenyan families have moved to Dubai. Kenyan families have moved to the US. So they moved to England. They moved to places where the children can get therapy because it's just not available here.
Yes.
So I just said I couldn't relocate because I'm working. I'm a single mom. You know, I don't have anybody else taking care of the bills. So eventually I convinced them to come over to Kenya. So they sent me a therapist. It took a long time. So they sent me a therapist. But after a year of working with a therapist and stuff, I mean, Khalil was doing amazing.
Yes.
Like literally a different human being altogether. But the cost was $3,000 a month.
What?
It was not sustainable.
Yeah.
So I eventually got hold of Professor Arasa at USIU and I said to her, look, can you kindly send me somebody that I can send to South Africa to get trained
Yes.
so that, you know, they can come back and work with my son once this contract is over?
Pause. Dr. Arasa, when you received that phone call, sorry, my apologies. Professor Arasa.
No
You were
problem.
doctor when you were my lecturer. Professor Arasa, like when you received that phone call from Sanaipe, what went through your mind?
Now, for me, as in academia, the first thing was, wow, here is a need. Here is somebody that we can support, because as psychologists, our role is to support humanity. And so what happened is that I said to myself, we can start this program here. It will take time, but we can do it. And being a university that believes in quality programs, quality services, I talked to Sanaipe and I told her, let's meet and discuss this because we can bridge that gap. And that's where now we started this process.
Spice.
Today we mark World Autism Day. Are you aware of the spectrum? Have you been affected by the spectrum, or is someone close to you autistic? On SpiceFM KE, on our socials, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, we're asking that question. It's just a simple poll, yes or no? Because with me are four amazing women. I have Dr. Susan, I have Professor Arasa, I have Pooja, I have Sanaipe. We are shedding light on what autism is, how it can be diagnosed, and what, if any, treatment options are out there. Now, Dr. Susan, you are a developmental pediatrician.
That's correct.
I need to understand, because I was completely neurotic when I became a mother. I had an Excel spreadsheet for my birth plan. I had that app that marked everything. He blinked. I keyed it in. In fact, if I'd done that with my budgeting, Mumbai, I'd be very rich. Huh? Mumbai, if I could do that with budget.
Psychology.
Yeah.
The
You know?
checklist for
Exactly.
developmental psychology.
Exactly, right? I'm there. So tell me, what are some of the milestones that parents need to watch out for or look out for with regards to children from birth up until about, 18 months?
All right. So this is specific for autism spectrum disorder.
Yes.
So in terms of the diagnosis, we'll start first with what we call social-emotional reciprocity. At and it's either from 1 year of age for parents, is that the first issue is they're not responding to their name when they're called. So when you call the name, the child is ignoring me, is a snob, what's going on? And a child who does not understand gestures. So when you tell the child to wave bye, they may not wave bye, they may not point to request. So those are usually the early signs that are there.
Yes.
And there are a few who at 6 months, you can see the child is not making good eye contact. And then again, at 1 year is more definitive. They're like, oh, for sure, this child is not looking at me. But after doing hearing assessments and their vision assessments, there's nothing wrong with their vision and their hearing. So those are the early markers of that parents should look out for and seek help from their pediatrician.
But you told me that there are also only 3 of you in the country.
So there are 3 of us in East Africa and even Central Africa, and we're all women.
Okay, firstly, I'm going to do a round of applause. Yeah, mentally, I'm clapping. Yeah, that you're all women. But why is that, considering that autism and developmental and cognitive challenges are not new nor unique? So why are there so few of you? And isn't there demand because, we're all having children?
So the issue is that the fellowships are done outside the country.
Okay.
So you have to have that commitment where after your pediatric residency training that you're going to take an extra 2 years of your life to go abroad. Most of us are working moms to go
Yes.
abroad with our families to do the training. So
Okay.
the limitations have been that. Like for me, I'm Canadian trained, so I had to move with my family to Canada. And you have to have that support
And the
within the family
resources.
and the resources to do that.
Sanaipe, you were talking about the fact that you had to go to the UK because you just simply did not find what you were looking for here, and that you called Professor Arasa and said, can I take somebody to South Africa to be trained? continue that conversation.
So yes, the only training center we had at the time, well, I thought we had at the time, was in South Africa.
Yes.
So my goal was to get somebody who was trained in psychology, which is a really good background for therapists, to go and get trained in ABA and then come and work full time with my child, which is what I'd been doing for the last year and a half.
Yes. And
so
you were going to cater to that cost for that individual?
Yes.
Wow.
I had no choice.
Yes.
You know, it was either that or relocate and move somewhere else.
Yes.
And when you relocate, as Dr. Wamithi said, you have to move with your family, you have to have the resources to be able to go and live somewhere else. Because I would not have been able to work in South Africa, maybe, or wherever else I was going to go.
Yes.
So what was I going to do with my business? What was I going to do about paying bills? What was I then going to do about paying for the therapy?
Exactly.
And even just the medical health care? So the cheapest option for me was to send somebody to South Africa. But then when Professor Arasa said, no, we can actually do it here, that was like a light bulb moment. Ding!
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, let me see what we can do. So I started writing to all the international associations that work with ABA. So there's ABAI International, there's quite a few others. So I wrote to them and, hit a few dead ends, and they weren't responding. I mean, they'd respond for a while and then they'd all go quiet.
Yes.
So I went on the list of the top 5 courses for ABA internationally. And I emailed all of them, and University of Nevada, Reno was number 4.
Yes.
They responded.
Wow.
And so we started talking with Professor Linda Hayes and Dr. Laura. And Professor Linda Hayes, she's the head of the program, is like a world-renowned ABA, in ABA and stuff. And just having her on board, everybody's like, "You're working with Professor Linda Hayes?" I was like, "Yeah." They're like, "Oh my God, we're on board." So we had 6 months worth of Zoom calls with them, and then Professor Frida Brown signed the MOU, and here we are. We've had our first 28 students.
And the course was launched on Monday.
Yes, 28th of March, and we have 28 students who are taking the first ever ABA training course in Africa.
Professor Arasa, tell me, what is ABA and your journey as an academic launching this program?
Thank you, Olivia. Now, ABA is Applied Behavior Analysis. And as you know, this is a psychology discipline. It's a subdivision of psychology. And USIU is the University for Psychology.
That's
when
why
you
I
want to
studied
do
psychology.
it's USIU. We offered the first BA, MS, and now a Doctor of Psychology.
Yes.
And so bringing ABA to USIU again is going to be the very first in Kenya, in the region, and in Africa. And so for us, when I got the opportunity to get acceptance with the University of Nevada, Reno, that they can work with us, it was very exciting. So we sat down, we started planning. We were on a weekly basis with Sanaipe and the people from the US. We even did a sensitization workshop so that people get to know what we want to do. And I can tell you over 200 participants attended that. You can see where the need is.
And these participants were people who were affected, or they were professionals or therapists?
Professionals, students, parents, people who own institutions, maybe with who take care of special needs children and all that.
Yes.
So it was really broad, not only from Kenya but all over the world.
Yes.
And then after that, she said we had an MOU signed first. And once that was signed, we put an advert. People applied. We only needed 25 because we need a small class, quality interactions. It's an online class. And for sure, we got even more than the 25. So you can see there's really, really need for this program.
Duration of the program, how long is it?
It's a 4 months online course.
Yes.
Once a week, the students meet for 4 hours.
Yes.
And so since they started this, it's going to go until August.
Yes.
And then the instructor from the US will come on a one-to-one, face-to-face interaction, and then move from there.
Is this adult learning? So what qualifications do you need to have in order to be eligible to apply for the course?
Now, this is level 2 of the training, where we are training technicians.
Okay.
That is the technician level, so that they can go and support parents and work with the ASD children. And so initially we wanted somebody who has done O levels.
Okay.
But I can tell you that people have applied, PhD holders, masters, undergraduate. In fact, I don't think we have many.
No, everybody is an undergraduate.
Yeah, an undergraduate to PhD.
Yes.
PhD.
Yes.
We have a
yes.
PhD.
Yeah.
Cost?
104,000
104,000. Now, Pooja,
Kenyan shillings.
the program that you run, these are people who are employed by your organization. There are people who are volunteering to work with your organization. And tell me more how this organization actually, came to being, because it's a very specialist sort of service that you offer.
Yes, it is. So I had my initial training in Canada where I was studying. And this was, when you're a broke student and you need some side hustle to make some extra cash.
Yes.
And I got my initial training in ABA under the level, like the technician level. So I started working with families. And that got me through. I got some experience there. I made a lot of connections. Then I came back to Kenya. And when I was here, I just distributing CVs looking for work. A parent approached me saying, I see you have autism experience. Please help my son. So I was like, I don't even have a job. I don't know where to set up. And she came with the first table and 2 chairs. And I started working with her son.
Yes.
He did amazing, progressed. Now, that word of mouth started spreading, and I had more inquiries and people asking for more support. And I'm quite OCD about if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it well.
Yes.
So that's when I pursued training. I got a scholarship in the States. I did my master's, got my full ABA training, sat the exam, got my supervision hours. We're also partners with the Global Autism Project since 2010. So I got my supervision hours and fieldwork along with them. So I became the first BCBA, which is a board-certified behavior analyst in East Africa at that time, Eastern and Central Africa.
How many of you are there here? Because we know with Dr. Susan, there are only 3 in East and Central Africa. How many of you are there?
Lucky number 3, but I'm the only local one.
Oh.
So there's 2 Americans,
Yes.
and there's myself. Again, all women.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
yes.
I'm sensing a trend here, but what I want to understand is how widespread is the problem, population-wise, percentage-wise, when you look at autism in Kenya and the experience that you have? And I'm going to talk to you, Dr. Susan, about that as well. What would you say?
So we don't have actual statistics in Kenya, but the latest statistics from the CDC, which are out of the US, are 1 in 54.
1 in 54.
Yeah, so that
Actually,
is
1 in
quite...
68 currently.
No,
One
it
in-
changed.
Yeah.
It's already been updated.
It's changed. Okay.
So
Yeah,
it's
been updated.
it's increasing.
It's increasing, and you've seen this trend throughout the year. So there's a few reasons this could be happening.
More diagnosis, more
More
awareness.
diagnosis, more awareness, all those kind of things. Yeah, so that's how I ended up in this. And then
Yes.
parent demand.
Yes.
So parents are actually what have led the growth of this organization. Parents came and said, our kids are not doing well in school now. We need you to have a full day program. So I got more training in teach. I'm also Montessori qualified, and we created a program that can allow for the children to learn holistically throughout the day.
Okay.
And they said we need speech therapy. So we brought in a speech therapist.
Yes.
In 2019, the speech therapist and I went to a merger because you find that parents are struggling. They're looking for OT here, speech there, there's a travel. They're wasting the child's time. The expenses are crazy. So we came together and merged services so that parents can come under one roof and get OT, ABA, speech therapy, social skills, physiotherapy if the child needs, vocation skills for the older ones
Yes.
as well. And we've seen huge success through this program, and we're also supporting them in the home.
Diagnosis. At what point do you say your child is on the spectrum?
So it ranges from 12 months to even 2 years, but there are those who come late
Yes.
due to various factors, whether it's access, denial. It's a journey that's individual. So the most common cause why they come in is delayed speech. that poor social interaction. And sometimes it's actually the feeding difficulties that come in first as Sanaipe's journey. And sometimes that's a first red flag that we're identifying. And so we're doing a lot of work as a university to figure out what's the genetics behind it. So we have work that we're doing as Aga Khan University, looking at the genetics for children who have autism spectrum disorder, who have ADHD, communication disorders, because we are seeing the numbers rising to be able to answer the questions that parents
Cause. Because a lot of us, especially as parents, we look at cause and effect. If I can do this for my child, or if I can avoid this for my child, or if I can provide this for my child, the effect is X, Y, and Z. What is there with regards to correlation, if any, with regards to the causes of children being on the spectrum? I know you're shaking your head, Sanaipe. I'm going to ask Dr. Susan first on that, then I'm going to come to you.
So we know that there is a gene-environment interaction,
Yes.
but we don't know what it is exactly. So we are in studies even here looking at air pollution, looking at lead poisoning, to try and figure out whether that's affecting developmental trajectories. But there are genetic implications behind it, like why trained everyone who gets a diagnosis gets a genetic test to see whether there's any associated genetic mutations. So for the African continent, we don't know. Because
Okay.
all our data is from abroad.
Okay.
And that's what we're trying to characterize, because the numbers are going up even in Nyeri, in Kilifi. I have patients in Mandera.
Age. Is age a factor? I have no idea, and perhaps there is limited data on this, but we as a society, maybe even globally, are having children later and later, right? I had my first son at 37, I think I was, right? Whereas my mother had her first child at, 21, right? So I'm just asking, is age a factor with regards to autism?
So for neurodevelopmental disorders, there are some associations with both paternal, because people forget about the older fathers.
Yes.
The paternal and maternal, but it's not always, because I have patients who are 21-year-olds and the child is on the spectrum.
Okay.
And that's why by us doing the research, we'll be able to better come up with what's the etiology, why are the numbers going up in Wajir, in Mandera, in Nairobi, because people would say before, it's because your child is in front of a screen. The child in Nyeri and Mandera
Microwave.
is not in front of, and they use.
Yeah,
and
microwaves were hugely.
So there's
yeah.
obviously something going on
Yes.
environmentally that's
Yes.
affecting the genetics, and that's the answers we're trying to find.
Sanaipe.
The reason I was shaking my head is because, when you're looking for causes for issues, especially when it comes to children, people always look at the parent like the parent was a criminal. No, true story.
Okay.
True story. It always boils down, because they say if there's no medical reason as for your child to be like this, then obviously you did something wrong when you were pregnant or beforehand. So a lot of people are saying maybe it's because some ladies had abortions that they're now being punished by having a child with
Autism.
or maybe you drank something when you were pregnant, or maybe you didn't treat yourself properly, or maybe you used drugs or something. So at the end of the day, if you had a pregnancy that was 100% kosher
Yes.
and your child came out with autism,
Yes.
you still as a parent go back and start asking yourself, was it maybe that one coffee I had when in my first trimester?
Exactly.
You start blaming yourself as an individual.
Yes.
So when people ask about causes and they don't find it, then they start looking at the parent.
Yes.
That for me also kills me.
Yes.
Because first and foremost, as a parent, you're dealing with on a new journey that you've never dealt with, issues you don't know anything about,
Yes.
or had hardly heard anything about.
Yes.
Then you're dealing with a situation that nobody can actually give you proper answers, and then you're hurting yourself
Yes.
by doubting yourself.
Cancer patients or families that have cancer patients have groups. They have a community. They have a place to go to get some sort of sense of, I am not alone in this journey. Did you find that, Sanaipe?
I don't join any groups. I'm not in any group.
Are there any?
I don't know. Dr. Wamithi, she's asked me before if I'm in any group, but no.
Is it a personal decision not to seek out, or not to want? I need to just ask.
I'm not a group person.
Okay.
And when you tell me to join WhatsApp and join a group, that's you've just knocked me out of that group, generally speaking. But I will provide whatever counseling and help I can to another parent if they seek me out.
Okay.
But I'm just not a group person.
Susan, you're talking about there is a group. There are
many groups. And so it's and we always give the parents a choice not to, because as Naipe has said, that those who don't want, and that's okay, because that's an individual, how you're wired. And then there are groups, the parents who want support groups immediately. So there are family support groups that will link you up in. Some are online, some on WhatsApp groups. So it just and people don't like group dynamics. So for me, I'm like, you're there to just access information, don't get into conflict, but the groups are there to support you. They even have like tea and fellowship in churches. They even have a Muslim group that they're different based on culture, religion. So they're there to support the parents who need that support.
Pooja, with regards to your organization, when I became a mother, I sought out all these playgroups because, an only child, you want him to have that social interaction, etc., etc., etc. When it comes to children on the spectrum, bringing them together, having groups, how does that work?
We make it really fun. So at the center, it's not like you say, you're not going to put, 5-10 children with autism and say, play together now, and they're going to play. It's not going to happen. So we have a lot of different activities that are organized to help them gain these social skills, everything from horse riding, swimming, dance. We encourage sharing. We encourage turn taking, asking for something from your peer, responding to something that is being asked from you. And this is how the group skills develop through activities.
Wonderful. Have you been affected? Have you been impacted? Are you living with autism? Do you know somebody who is? Today is World Autism Awareness Day 2022. Reach out on SpiceFM KE, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We have a poll going. All I have to say is yes or no.
Spice.
This is Double O Direct, a safe space for all women. Women host music only by women. And every single Saturday, I am dressed by a different woman in fashion. When I say woman in fashion, unauza nguo. That's all. However, are you importing them? Are you making them here? Are you a designer? Do you have a physical space? Do you only operate online? Are you a woman in fashion? Are you a fashion entrepreneur? You're somebody who just wants to make money from garments, right? Do you dress women? Because, hello, that's how you're going to be on Double O Direct. On Instagram, Olivia Otieno. That's my handle. Olivia, not Oliver, please. Olivia, surname is Otieno. DM me, tell me, Olivia, I want to be your woman in fashion. I want to dress you just as Angel has today. Her label is Kokio_label. That's what I'm wearing today. It's a dress and it has pockets and I love it. Well, due to laryngitis, I wasn't on air for the last 2 weeks. It is a terrible affliction, let me tell you, for a radio presenter not be able to talk for 2 weeks. But last week, we did celebrate 1 year of Double O Direct, and I was here in spirit as Mumbi shared clips from the last 1 year. So I'm really glad to be back. I'm very happy, and we are marking World Autism Day today. I'm joined by 4 phenomenal women: Sanai Payne Timama, Pooja Panesa, Professor Josephine Arasa, and Dr. Susan Wamithi. She is only one of 3 developmental pediatricians, not just in Kenya, but in East and Central Africa. The need is great.
Yes.
You've told me that it's 1 in 54, the diagnosis with autism.
So that's this CDC data.
Yes.
But now in terms of in our own country, unfortunately, we don't have enough information just because of the diagnostic problem.
Educated guess from the fact that you were a developmental pediatrician. What would you say?
I'd actually say maybe it's 1 to 100. And this is just my... for us in academia, we don't like educated guesses.
I know. Professor Rasa has given you some serious side eye. She's like, what are you talking about?
Yes. And that's some of the work that we're doing currently is trying to identify our patients and trying to figure out what's the genetics behind it all.
Is there any study at all currently going on? Because I'm looking for a PhD topic. Right, Dr. Rasa, I told you. Yeah, is there any study going on where we can help to understand, the prevalence of autism?
I had a student at the doctoral level who did some basic study on autism, but not on prevalence. But as an institution of higher learning, I'm hoping that now that we have this program at the university, we are going to work together with the people here and others out there to do a study that will give us all the statistics that we need. And I think that will be the beginning for putting interventions in place, because without data that supports what you are doing, you are not doing much.
You're doing quackery. Puja Panesa, you wanted to say something.
A few years ago, I got together with a company called Geopol, and we sent out surveys through mobile phones because we were trying to figure out what's the best way to access everyone, even in the rural areas.
Yes.
And it would be through mobile. And we try to send out surveys on, does your child have a disability? Do you have somebody with a disability in the home? Is it autism? Is it developmental? Is it physical? We got some data, and the article is available. I don't remember everything offhand,
Yes.
but the data is over there. It was still incomplete because the data was not comprehensive. We didn't get comprehensive
What was
results.
the sample size?
We had the whole, I think it was the whole of Kenya at that time when we did the survey. Yeah, but you have mobile provider limitations. There are other limitations.
And I see, the Professor, you're saying you're not agreeing so much that it was the whole of Kenya.
No, yeah, of course.
Speak your
Yes.
truth. Speak,
Of
speak your
course.
truth.
No. Basically, they sampled,
Yes.
but maybe the details
It
are
was-
not there because
Okay.
it can't be the whole of
True.
Kenya.
Yeah.
That's true. Something, was it 1,000? With regards to your response
I
rate?
actually don't remember offhand because
Yes.
it was a few years ago.
No
We can
worries.
pull the article up.
Yes.
If you look for Geopol,
Yes.
you'd actually be able to pull that up.
Yes.
I was going to say something about what we are also currently doing.
What did,
Yes,
what did
so
you find? I mean, I know it was inconclusive, but on average, what did you find?
there's a lot of people all over. Like I said, the exact data I don't remember offhand, but it is something that's accessible. And I am also currently working on a study on not necessarily just the prevalence, but in
Yes.
understanding the perceptions as well, because there's a lot around the perceptions. And as we do this, we're going to be doing surveys around the country, focusing on rural areas.
Sanaipe, just to interject before we have the doctor and the professor talk, your journey with Kal-El, from diagnosis to date, with regards to treatment and management, how has that been?
I've been extremely lucky in the fact that I've had great medical support.
So we'll pause on that. We'll pause on the medical and the therapy, etc. The changes you've seen with
Oh my
him.
God, he's like a whole new different person.
Tell me about
He's
those
in
changes.
kindergarten now.
You've skipped the beat. Now, Olivia, he was diagnosed at X months.
He was diagnosed just before his second birthday.
Yes.
All right. And in January this year, at 4.5 years, he went to kindergarten.
Okay.
All right. So he's been in therapy every day for two and a half years.
So when you say therapy every day,
He does full-time therapy.
like a
Like
full-time job.
9 to 4.
9 to 4.
Yes, he's in therapy 9
And
to 4.
and tell me about the milestones that you saw him hit in that 2-year journey, and the timelines those took with regards for you.
I must admit timelines, because there's always 10 steps forward and 7 steps backwards.
True.
All right. So Kal-El is feeding himself. He's putting on his own clothes. He's pointing and asking for things. It's called manding. He's saying he's got a few words, not sentences. We're hoping to get sentences,
Yes.
because now we've got a speech therapist on top of the ABA therapist. But he's interacting with other kids. He's playing with them. He's holding their hands. He's hugging them. He's looking people directly in the eye,
Yes.
high-fiving guys,
Yes.
waving goodbye, saying hello, saying hi, open,
Yes.
He's eating solid food. He's feeding himself pasta, rice,
Wonderful.
the kind of things that I never even thought, I couldn't even imagine this happening, because at one stage everything was pureed. So for us, I mean, he's even sleeping through the night now.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. So last night
Potty
he was
training?
we're getting there.
Yes.
We're getting there. It's that's a struggle.
Yes.
Because one of the things he's very controlled. He likes to control his environment. He does not like being wet. And one of the
Okay.
things about potty training is obviously he has to get
Wet.
wet. He can't stand it. So he holds it in until he's actually literally in pain.
Okay.
All right. And then so it's there's a small meltdown, but eventually it happens.
But so far, you've seen a lot of amazing milestones being hit in the
Yes.
last 2 years as a result of
Absolutely.
diagnosis, as a result of therapy, and as a result of management.
We were
and
very
treatment.
lucky. There's a thing called early intervention,
Yes.
which works extremely well with kids on the spectrum. We at 2 were in therapy.
Okay.
Some kids start, I think the earliest they start is 18 months, but even at the center we were at in England, he was the youngest there.
I love that, Sanaipe. Professor Arasa, you had your hand up. You wanted to say
Yeah,
something?
one of the things that I love about ABA and why we really want to be associated with it is the fact that, as we've said, early intervention with ABA makes some of these changes, happen very fast. In fact, research has shown that children might even
Fall off the spectrum.
fall off from the spectrum
As a result of
if
this.
it's done early and with the right professionals, timing, and the right person.
We have seen that.
Daktari,
Yeah.
what is stopping a lot of parents from doing that?
It's because of course, there are cultural issues,
Yes.
but it's the time commitment.
Okay.
I'm sure Sanaipe, she told you what it's taken to get someone to be there from 9 to 4. So parents are like, when will my child go to school? The conflict that we get is that not understanding that early intervention
Yes.
needs to be that 9 to 4. And you find that they're not understanding that 9 to 4, Monday to Friday is early intervention. So you'll find a lot of pushback because they want their child to go to school as everyone else. And so it's that there are cultural and socioeconomic reasons why they won't commit to that 9 to 4.
Is
It's
there
some of the-
anybody that is talking about autism in, marriage counseling? Is there anybody talking about autism? And I'm looking at you, Pooja, right? During that time of pregnancy, because for me, I was told, don't eat cheese. Wachana na, shrimp or whatever. I was given all kinds of things, and I'm addicted to caffeine. Stop drinking coffee, But no one ever told me about, autism. Of course, we had that in the UK. For us, the genetic testing is a big thing. So I went through the whole genetic testing, and then you get that form, from the NHS, and it's like you're scared to open that envelope because that envelope will basically tell you, does your child have Down syndrome? I mean, in utero, does your child have? You're afraid. Does that happen here?
No. During pregnancy, there is actually no testing for autism at the moment. But I also want to mention, like Dr. Wamithi was saying, there's the time commitment, but also many doctors don't fully grasp autism and fully grasp the intervention that's required.
Yes.
So they do recommend a lot of parents, just take your child to school, they'll grow out of it. Take your child to school, they'll learn how to talk by being with the other children. But when this child does not yet know how to be with the other children, they're not gaining from those interactions. So that becomes a big challenge. I end up facing that because parents, by the time they get to me, they've been advised to do A, B, C, D, and so far they've wasted 2 years pursuing those trends before they get to the point of intervention that is effective.
Is it a first child issue? Or are you, I don't know, tell me, Dr. Wamithi, is it a first child issue? If you are experiencing or looking at the diagnosis of autism from your experience, is there any real correlation between first child, second child, third child?
So there is a tendency for first-born males.
Yes.
And just as because developmental disorders in general are more prominent in males, it's like 4-to-1 ratio.
So wait.
For males, yeah.
4-to-1 ratio, developmental disorders, males to females.
Yes.
Sons to daughters.
Yes.
Okay. And you're saying that there's a correlation between firstborns.
So the correlation is that most of the times if you have a firstborn male child,
Yes.
and it's not always because
Yes.
there are people who are middle children, lastborns, but we do know about the male aspect of things, and that's why we follow up the siblings. But it's really important that you don't say, oh, because I'm having a male child, that my child will have,
Of course.
even if it runs in the family.
Yes.
And so those are some of the misconceptions. And as I just want to comment on what Pooja has said, is that our job as in academia is to educate even the doctors who are general pediatricians or medical officers. Like now we have a program between us at the Kenya Pediatric Association and the American Academy of Pediatrics where we trained 120 pediatricians on what is developmental milestones? What is atypical development? And we even had people from 7 and other African countries.
You've just said a term that I want you to define: atypical development. For those of us who didn't study psychology.
So typical development is where a child, through studies that I've done for years, is that by 1 year you say mama, baba, and we always have like a 3-month window.
Yes.
But for a child who is not meeting those milestones is what we call atypical development.
Okay.
And because we hate the terms abnormal, those are
Archaic terms.
They're archaic terms, so we
Yes.
call it atypical development. And so by this program that we have, that we've been training pediatricians, so that we're not running to the problem where you're being told, go to school if you have autism spectrum disorder.
Yes.
So raising awareness is also educating. We've come back to the country to educate the region as to what is early intervention, what does it look like, and what are the time commitments, so we're not wasting time.
Sanaipe.
Yes, I was just going to say, there's a lot of issues when it comes to parents accepting the diagnosis.
That there is, in fact, a problem. There is, in fact, a challenge. There is, in fact,
It's
a
not a
milestone that's
problem,
been hit.
there is an issue
Okay.
that as a parent,
Yes.
I must address for the sake of my child. So what happens is a lot of parents go into denial. All right. This is the reason why early intervention becomes an issue, because they're not ready and willing to take that step to address the issue with early intervention.
Yes.
So I didn't have time to think. All I said was, yes, please, can we go into therapy?
Can't you not say, as a single parent, the buck stopped with you? Because there are
Yes.
also issues where maybe he wants to say, but she said no.
There's a lot of parents I've met
Yeah.
who the mother has understood and wanted to do something, and the father has refused because he's still not accepting it, or the father has accepted and the mother is still in denial because she's like, I gave birth to this child, maybe I did something to this child, or things like
People
that.
will think it's me.
Yes. So there's so many issues, but parental acceptance is the first step to getting children help.
Yes.
All right. I didn't have time to think twice. I'm a doer. I just said, yes, let's get on with this.
Yes.
Right. I came to read the material after.
Yes.
Much later, by the way.
Yes.
Once I'd put him in there and I had time to read about it, and I was given like 17 different booklets and websites and what have you. And that's the best thing about getting a diagnosis in places like England. The information is available.
Speaking of information, Professor Arasa, these 28 students that you have for the Khalil program at the USIU, upon completion, what do they get that recognizes them, number one? And number two, what can they now do with the skills that they've acquired? Because, I mean, they're not going to be PhD level, but what can they now do?
Thank you. Now, what is going to happen is that once they go through this training,
Yes.
they'll get certification, of course, showing USIU and University of Nevada, Reno. Now, we expect that these students can now move on to the next level, which is the assistant one, is it? Yeah. Or to and keep moving. But then we are hoping that as a university, we'll be able to move maybe to another level of training, so that we don't have people out there and they are hoping that they can move forward. So as a university, we hope to introduce another level
Yes.
of training once we have enough pool of these technicians, and of course train people are going to supervise them. It's very important that we have people supervising the technicians, otherwise then we are going to have some more gaps and it will not work well. And then from there we hope maybe to introduce degree programs
Okay.
at the undergraduate, at the masters, and even at the PhD as time goes by.
Wonderful.
So,
Thank you, Professor. Pooja, you raised your hand. You were talking about the fact that what can they do with this certification?
Yeah, so there are a few levels of certification when you look at the field of ABA.
Yes. Can we please use long form?
Sorry.
Applied
Behavior analysis.
Thank
you
you.
for that. There is the general technician, and now there are two recognizing bodies of international certification.
Yes.
There is the Association of Behavior Analysis International, but that is pulling out as of 2023.
Why?
They are not taking on international supervision of these certificates is a big job.
True.
So they're pulling out and restricting to US and Canada, but there is the QABA, Qualified Applied Behavior Analysis Board. That's the one I'm on the international committee. They are taking on the international supervision.
Yes.
So there's different levels. There's the ABAT, which is the Applied Behavior Analysis Technician,
Yes.
the level that now USIU is going into.
Okay.
Amazing.
Yes.
Then there is the next one.
So let's pause.
Yes.
As Abbat,
Yes.
what are you now qualified to do?
You are qualified you need a supervisor. That's the first thing. You cannot run ABA without somebody who is supervising those services.
Yes.
Supervisors are the other levels.
Yes.
So there's the QBA, Qualified Behavior Analyst,
Yes.
and then there is the assistant of the Qualified Behavior Analyst.
Yes.
They can supervise the technician level, but without the supervision, they should not be providing
So
ABA.
can they work in tandem with Dr. Wamithi at her practice? Yeah, or do they? Where do they go? That's my question. Are they in schools? Are they in kindergarten?
They look for me.
So
Sanai Pei.
basically, a lot of the people who have applied for this course
Yes.
are actually working in institutions right now.
Okay.
Where people do need applied behavior analysis. So they're working in schools, international schools actually. In Kenya, in the support learning department.
I mean,
Alright?
let's be honest. It is because I don't know how many of our government schools have those facilities available, in the institution. So I get where you're
So
going,
the-
but we should have.
Yes,
those
we should.
facilities
We should.
available.
So we shouldn't leave it to the international schools. So the international schools, we have actually 4 or 5 of them who have the support learning teachers on this course.
Yes.
Then we have people from who have centers for children on the spectrum or with disabilities. We have about 6 of those.
Yes.
And then we have other people who have worked as therapists but not with actual training
Yes.
or
Yes.
certification.
Okay.
So this first cohort is actually people who know what they're doing.
Okay.
All right, who might end up going to Puja for a job maybe to
Yes.
help her, with children in the class in her therapy center.
Yes.
But eventually, we expect them to go to the next level and get an undergraduate degree, get a master's, and become supervisors.
Spice.
We are recognizing World Autism Day. With me are 4 sensational women: Sanai Pei Tamama, Pooja Panesa, Professor Josephina Rasa, and Dr. Susan Wamithi. Daktari, I need to understand why we are having such a difficult time bringing developmental issues, right? And bringing autism in particular to the fore, even as women, we prepare for motherhood. Why is it never discussed?
So whenever it comes to neurodevelopmental conditions like
Yes.
autism spectrum disorder, sometimes there's a bit of pushback by families because there are those cultural beliefs that if you say something, it will happen. And so whenever you talk about, especially during pregnancy, we talk about these are the things that will happen. And people are afraid when you're talking about, let's test for Down syndrome.
Yes.
Let's do do your developmental screening because
Yes.
of that fear. And that's a cultural thing.
And you also mentioned the fact that it's not limited, even though there are correlations, but it's not limited to firstborns with regards to recognizing and diagnosing of autism. So at what point, when you have a woman who's had her first child, her second child, now she's going to her third child, do you get those parents recognizing that we've had atypical behavioral issues earlier? Or do you find the same issues as with a woman's first child?
So it's easier for those who've had children before to spot the differences.
Yes.
And they tend to come earlier because they're like, something's different with this child.
Yes.
But for those who are firstborns, it's the same story where they're reassured, especially for males.
Mm-hmm.
And then for girls, they are very good in camouflaging their autism spectrum disorder. So those are the ones who are easily missed.
Tell me about what we need to look out for. Maybe I'm going to have a second child. Maybe my child will be a girl. What do I need to look out for? Because you're saying they're good at camouflaging. So what are some of the tricks or what are some of the behaviors they exhibit?
So they tend to smile more. But when it comes to the communication, they could be just labeling objects, but they're not going to, when you ask, do they say mommy? They don't say mommy, they don't say daddy, but they know the alphabet. They're singing all the melodies on the show tune, but they're not using language for communication.
Where do those who are not diagnosed or who are diagnosed much later, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, where do they end up? I don't know who wants to take this one, but where are they?
I'll let Dr. Wamithi start and then.
So there are two aspects. There are those if they got early intervention, or they have parents who had resources to take their children abroad and came back home. You find that they're being able to have patients who write books, who are doing their planting. They work for Safaricom because Strathmore University have an IT program for those type of children. And then unfortunately, there are those who are in mental health hospital institutions, and then the unfortunate ones are those who are in prisons because of the mental health issue, having them commit a crime that they're not even aware of. And
Have
so
you ever
those
been
are-
called upon, and this is something I'm just going to jump off topic for 1 second. Have you ever been called upon by law enforcement, to give diagnoses because, someone who has been arrested or who is incarcerated has exhibited certain characteristics or certain traits that you believe really they should not be punished for a crime in which they are not cognizant of?
So as a pediatrician, no, because the ones who are committing the crimes are usually young adults. And so it's probably the psychiatrists who are being called for those.
Yes. What about women who give birth in prisons? Because you've had a lot of issues of that. And also I was told recently that as a woman, if you commit a crime, your child is incarcerated along with you.
I was actually in Thika prison, women's prison, like a week ago.
Yes.
So we went as the Kenya Pediatric Association to be able to advocate for these children who are growing up in the prisons. And so they've done really good work, at least in that prison that I went to visit. They have a daycare facility. The children are being taken for vaccines. But of course, the developmental domains will be affected if you're growing around other women prisoners. So there's a lot of work to be unpacked. So the Kenya Pediatric Association is actually, we're looking at a proposal, we're writing to figure out what are the needs for these women and their children in the prison setting. So there is work that we're doing ongoing.
This is very difficult for you, Sanaipe. What is your 2 cents on this?
I can't imagine a woman being forced to give birth in prison, for one. 2, for a child to be forced to be brought up in that environment, because psychologically that is damaging for life. I don't know how much treatment you as a child would need to get over that situation. And even if they do give you all the psychological help, I doubt that that memory will ever be erased. And that is where the cycle goes, where you will probably end up in prison giving birth. And it's that cycle that is extremely hard to break, and with children with developmental issues.
I will give Sanaipe a moment. Pooja, we're talking about those who are diagnosed much later. They didn't have that early intervention. In their teens, in their 20s, in their 30s, you come across autistic adults in your line of work. Where are they?
Some of them are still learning who they are, actually. We've done a number of awareness events, as I mentioned, and during one of those events, at the end of the talks and everything, I had a 38-year-old man come up and say, "This explains everything. Now I know why I'm different." And he had been struggling his whole life, not understanding why he's not getting these social norms and fitting in and struggling through, each day. So there's those who are still discovering who they are. They're struggling within the system. They're struggling with their life. There's the whole array that Dr. Wamithi has talked about. From my side, we see them at the center. So we have some teenagers, some adults. I'm happy that 2 of our adults have just recently got full-time employment with benefits, because we try and coach them through the vocations and everything to get to that point. But that, again, comes with accessibility.
Yes.
Which not everyone has. And yeah.
Professor Arasa, you're an academic. You're a professor of psychology. What is your contribution, and what do you see with regards to USIU playing a role in ABA and with regards to even those as adults who exhibit these autistic traits?
I think for me, having had this discussion today, I realized that there's so much that we need to do. As a university, yes, we are going to train, build capacity, have a pool of people who can start helping parents. But then there are those people out there who don't even know that they have the problem.
Or that they're on
There
the
are
spectrum.
those, yeah. So I think as a university, together with Aga Khan and other people, we need to come together and reach out to the masses. The many people are suffering out there and don't even know that they have ASD. We need to conduct baseline surveys where we need to know where we are as a country, how many people we are talking about, so that we can be able to make informed decisions.
Yes.
And once that research is done, we need to continuously reach out to parents, provide support, provide psychosocial support, and other facilities or services, so that we are all together, so that it doesn't look like this is catering for a specific group of people.
Yes, yes.
I think if we
Absolutely.
can do that, then for me, I'll say yes. As psychology, we've contributed to humanity. And basically, that's why we are psychologists. ABA is psychology.
I love that, Professor. Doctor, I know you have to leave soon, so your parting words?
So for me, as a developmental pediatrician, it's just to appeal to parents that if you find that a child has developmental delays in terms of they're delayed in speech, there's it's the social interaction, they're not making eye contact, they're not responding to their name, they are not engaging with family members, kindly go see your pediatrician. Because the pediatrician is able to do a baseline assessment, and if they think it's someone who needs to see me, that they can come and see me. But don't stay at home. The earlier you get the diagnosis, the earlier the intervention, the better the outcomes.
So when it comes to seeing you, let's say you've spoken to a pediatrician, maybe you're not very convinced, you just want a second opinion. Where can you be found, Dr. Susan Wamithi?
So I'm at the Aga Khan University Hospital in Nairobi, which is in Third Parklands, and our website is www.hospital.aku.edu.
Okay, I think people should just Google Aga Khan University Hospital, yeah, because her skills are in developmental pediatrics, not the giving of websites.
Spice.
4.4 on SpiceFM in Nairobi. We're also streaming live on the homepage of standardmedia.co.ke. I am Olivia Otieno. This is 00 Direct every Saturday from 10 a.m. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Are you or someone you know affected by autism? Today is World Autism Awareness Day. We're just conducting a simple poll because, as the professor, Josephine Arasa, has said, we don't have enough data. So please help us provide some data. I know it's not scientific in my collection methods, but it will help us understand. Are you or someone you know affected by autism? SpiceFM KE, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And I know, Dr. Susan, you're about to leave. But then the professor asked a very, very, very important question. What happens to those who don't even have access to a pediatrician? Are there any resources in place? Are they being reached in any way?
So the Ministry of Health, and this is the Division of Neonatal and Child Care, and Child Health, they have trained community health workers. These are the women in the villages on early child development.
Yes.
And their role is that they've been taught how to use the Ministry of Health booklet that has information about developmental delays and developmental milestones.
Yes.
And so those women who are on the ground in the villages are able to reach out and say, oh, this child is not talking, this child is not walking. So this is where you need to go as a mother.
Yes.
And so the Ministry of Health has done a lot of work in making sure that they're training all cadres of health just so that there's access for these women, and they have referral pathways as to you go see the community health worker, sends you to the clinic,
Yes.
where there's either a nurse or a clinical officer who does the review and says this one needs to be referred further up to a pediatrician. And so those referral pathways are there. And now even the Ministry of Health has a register or a database where children who have disabilities are able to be identified.
Yes.
And put into that registry, so that now we have the data to say we need this much allocation of funds because we have X number of children. As Professor said, if we don't generate the data, we won't know how to allocate resources. So the Ministry of Health is doing a lot of work in terms of the Division of Neonatal and Child Health to be able to shed light to parents, to be able to have those referral pathways to where they see the pediatrician at the end as is needed.
I really like that because more often than not, we're so into government bashing. Yeah. But let's also give credit where credit is due. I want to ask about Kal-El Sanaipe and what brings him calm? Because a lot of times we've talked about, speech therapy. We've talked about other forms of therapy. He's now eating, but what in his environment do you provide, that gives him a sense of calm with regards to managing his autism?
So Khalil is, he loves space. He loves to run around. So when he's really upset, you take him outside. And once he's outside, I think nature generally just calms him. Another thing is he loves car rides. So when we've reached the end of the tether, just put him in a car. It doesn't matter which one. It can even be an Uber. And he will be 5 minutes in, he's absolutely fine. And he also likes his safe spaces. Like, he knows home, he knows his bedroom, and he has a grey blanket. God forbid we lose that blanket. God forbid that blanket is being washed. God forbid it's not dry. So what happened was eventually we had to get 8 of the
identical blankets.
Yes. And I must admit, you were talking about women who have inspired me.
Mm-hmm.
I have a best friend. Her name is Kaizora. She's also Khalil's godmother. So when we were in England, this grey blanket was in the washing machine and this guy was having a meltdown. So we realized we need more than just the one. All right. So she ran around 6 to 8 different shops, sending me pictures so we could look at the blanket, look at the picture, see if it was almost the same color.
Yes.
All right. And eventually she managed to get 4 from John Lewis. She brought them all to the house.
Yes.
All right. We didn't even bother washing them. We just gave it. As soon as he touched it and he was fine with it, we could live.
How do you educate or how do you introduce Khalil to other children, for example, or to even other parents? Because I find myself with my own son, for example, being in the company of other adults or, other children, and how, as a child with autism, do you make that introduction? Is there anything that is said? Is there any awareness that needs to be done prior to the introduction? How does that work?
You see, I don't see Khalil as a child with autism. Khalil is just a kid to me.
Okay.
He's my son. So wherever we need to go, we go. If he wants to interact with the adults, he does. If he doesn't, he doesn't. If he wants to interact with the kids, he does. If he doesn't, he doesn't.
Is there a need, and I'll ask you, Pooja, for parents with children on the spectrum to make that known?
I wouldn't say it's necessary because, like Sanaipe said,
yes,
it is your child. And I want every parent, actually, so many that I work with, that's the first thing that we have to bring in. That yes, there is autism that we're working on, but this is your child.
Yes.
Especially for those who have a lot of stigma within the family and a lot of backlash. But that's your child. And then I encourage for them to just be open for if people ask, why is your child doing this or what's going on? Yes, talk about autism, create the awareness, because that's where the stigma manifests from. It's those black holes of knowledge where people don't know what it is and that it's just a different wiring. It's a different brain wiring. It's not that this child is, cursed or those other misconceptions that live out there. So parents are the biggest advocates, actually, within our community.
I know Dr. Terry needed to leave, so we'll do this again. Parting words. Right? Parting words, other than to find the Aga Khan University Hospital website, because you are a developmental pediatrician at the Aga Khan University Hospital. What are your parting words with regards to marking and recognizing World Autism Day?
So for me, it's about practice kindness. So practice kindness in your community, practice kindness in a mosque, in a church, in schools. Your job is not to point at the child, point at the parent, blame. So for me, it's practice kindness whenever you see any atypical development or differences with other people's children.
Thank you so much, Dr. Susan Wamithi, development pediatrician, Aga Khan University Hospital, only one of 3 in East and Central Africa. I want to thank you for being on Double O Direct. We will be continuing the conversation. And remember, you're always welcome back on Double O Direct.
Thank you.
Spice.
We are continuing the conversation on autism. Yes, understanding what it is, diagnosis, management, treatment. I had to say goodbye to Dr. Susan Wamithi from the Aga Khan University Hospital. She is a developmental pediatrician, but I'm still with Sanapain Timama, Pooja Panesar, and Professor Josephine Arasa. And I want to find out something, Sanaipe. Are you doing the course? Are you part of the CALL program? Are you one of the 28?
Unfortunately not, but I'm sponsoring 6 students.
Okay, that's
All right.
incredible.
So that is my contribution to the course. Secondly, when my son first went into therapy in England,
Yes.
they make you do a parents course. So it's literally like 3 weeks worth of, this is what ABA is, this is what we'll be doing to your child, these are the results you should expect, these are the modifications we're hoping to do, and this is what ABA really is, the background, or what have you. And then they give you those 17 booklets and 85 websites to go read through.
And that was in England. So I want to find out from Professor Arasa, would you recommend, if you are a parent of a child with autism who's on the spectrum, that they take this course, or are there other courses for that?
I think it will be important if the parent first has the time and can afford to enroll in the program, because
Yes.
it's always important to know what you are going through
Yes.
or what is affecting you.
Yes.
Like Sanape says, she's hard to read, and I can tell you, I think she could teach the course. I don't think there's anybody who can talk about ASD, autism spectrum disorder, or ABA like her. I was joking during the launch that we need to give her an honorary degree in ABA. She's just knowledgeable.
What was your undergrad, by the way?
Law and politics.
Gee.
Yeah.
Give her an honorary one. I second that motion. Professor Brown, I second it. Right? So, Pooja, tell me about the organization that you run and how it is structured.
Okay, so Kaizora Therapies, the one in Karen, it's an interdisciplinary team working together,
Yes.
led by myself, the BCBA, behavior analyst, and Brooke Jadida, who's the speech and language pathologist. So within the organization, we have an occupational therapy department, an ABA department, a speech and language pathology department, special education, vocations, and social skills training.
Are clients referred to you through medical institutions, or do they just find you online?
Everything.
Okay.
I think the most that we've had is word of mouth from parents themselves. They are our biggest advocates because they see the results. So there's this institution in Karen. We've always been concerned. Okay, so there's no financial support. So parents do have to pay.
Yes.
But we always have that, how else can we support those who cannot pay?
Yes.
So just before COVID not washed us away, but took us, gave us a bit of a hit, we started a foundation. So through the foundation, we're trying to raise funds as much as possible so we can go and sponsor those children who need these services but are not able to reach out and get them anywhere.
Yes.
So we've sponsored a number of children, one adult who is now fully employed, a number of kids who have been able to move on to schools as well. Now this organization, copy-paste, we have one in Tanzania, in Dar es Salaam.
Did you start those as well?
Yes.
Okay.
But there we have a third partner. The reason that we went there is the third partner, who is a pediatric neurologist over there, actually pulled us.
Okay.
Please help us. There's not enough to help the kids, so help us get something going. So that's how that started.
Have you been pulled in by any educational institutions? Did you work with any of those perhaps private schools that Sanaipe was referring to?
Absolutely. I've worked with schools from day one. A lot of the international schools. I've been to some of schools in slums as well, done some trainings over there too. So schools, we have to work alongside schools. In fact, because we are really trying to advocate for inclusive education, because when the children graduate from Kaizora and they go into schools and there's not enough inclusive education provided, you'll find that there are gaps that grow wider if they're not catered for effectively. So hopefully by September this year or soon, you'll be hearing about Meraki School, which
Yes.
is a school that we're starting, that we're looking to really provide and demonstrate what inclusive education
Is
should
all
look
about.
like. Yeah.
Sanaipe, how did you get in touch with Pooja?
It was online actually.
How did you meet?
So eventually I started going because, when I realized that, keeping a therapist from South Africa here was not sustainable.
Yes.
I started looking online, and for the first time ever, I bumped into Kaizora.
Okay.
So I called,
Yes.
and then she called me back. Then we had a meeting, and then she said, okay, hi, we can work together. And I said, please, while we're waiting for the ABA course to start, can we please work together? Then when we realized we needed supervisors for the ABA course, I was like, well, we have one here who might be able to help.
Yes.
So generally, it's been an all-around helping each other.
Yes.
Because, other parents need therapies. I call Pooja in for assessments and helping other parents as well. And then, the ABA course, the students need work experience. They go to Pooja, they'll hopefully go to Pooja.
Yes.
And, also at the same time, we all need some sort of backbone to keep us
Yes.
afloat.
What other gaps are there before I go to you, Professor Arasa? Because as a parent, you're happy with the support, or you're happy with your interaction with Kaizora, number one.
Yes.
Number two, you've developed this amazing program now with USIU.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at it as a parent, where still might there be gaps?
Oh, everywhere.
Yes.
Absolutely everywhere. I mean, in terms of speech therapists, there aren't enough. In terms of occupational therapists, there aren't enough. Physical therapists, especially for children,
Yes. Yes.
there aren't enough. I mean, there's a lot of things going on for adults and anybody over the age of 13. But when it comes to 13 and toddlers,
Yes.
there's nobody who can really handle them. So, and then when you go to somebody with an idea and you want to work with them and your child, they're looking at you like, hey, I'm not sure this can happen.
Yes.
And then also, the worst thing is in Kenya, we're so rigid. People don't think us outside their little work description.
Yes.
All right?
Yes.
So when you bring an idea to them, they automatically just shut it down.
Mhm.
So one of the best things about working with USIU is Professor Rasa actually opened my mind to a whole new aspect of how we can do ABA. Because I was just going to take one of her students to South Africa and only train one.
Yes.
Now we're training 28.
Yes.
So you can see how that completely changed
Yes.
because of her vision.
Okay.
All right. And not just sticking to her little job description and saying, this is what I'm going to do as a professor of psychology. I'm going to have one
Yes,
person
yes.
trained in ABA.
Acting chair.
Acting chair. I'm going to have only one person trained in psychology. So now we have 28.
Yes.
All right. So that's for me has been amazing. Meeting people like Pooja, Dr. Arasa and Dr. Wamithi. Without Dr. Wamithi, I don't really know where we'd be right now because the encouragement she gives every so often when we go for our reviews. And she keeps telling me, if you carry on like this, you really will fall off the spectrum. You guys really will fall off the spectrum.
I want to come back to Professor Arasa. Tell me.
Now, I think it's important for me to put psychology of USIU in perspective.
Please.
Because maybe people are wondering why USIU and not any other university.
Mm-hmm.
Now, USIU is known for psychology.
Mm-hmm.
We were the very first. We started with a BA in psychology program. From there, other universities came up with one. Then we introduced MA counseling psychology. Again, we were the very first. Then we moved on to clinical psychology. Again, we were the very first. Then we introduced a doctoral program in clinical psychology. The very, very one. There isn't, either they have PhD or something, but we have a doctoral program in clinical psychology. But then we also have MA in marriage and family therapy.
Yes.
So we have an holistic department where we can be able to provide other psychology solutions to people. So together with ABA, which is a psychology field, we can work together. So people shouldn't feel like, oh, maybe this program is in some other department. They are not psychologists. We have faculty in the department with experience, expertise, who can really now work together with the ABA professionals so that we can provide that holistic support to children with ASD.
Vice Chancellor Professor Brown, psychologist.
Yes, she is from the Vice Chancellor, the former Deputy Vice Chancellor, Professor Ruth Rono,
Yes.
psychologist.
Yes.
She's now in the department,
Yes.
and all the other psychologists.
Excellent. Pooja?
I just really want to applaud that because I personally spent over 2 years trying to get into a public university to get the ABA courses going, and I reached dead end after dead end. And this program actually coming out, I've tried starting my own, honestly, time is a huge issue, and
Yes.
I'm so happy to see this.
Yes.
And, I'm sure myself and the other BCBAs are fully supportive to get this going.
I know that we don't have much time, so I'm going to ask you for your parting words. From Kaizora, from yourself as an ABA specialist, what is it that you want Kenyans to know, that you want Kenyans to understand with regards to autism?
Autism needs to come with acceptance, needs to come with inclusion.
Yes.
So when it comes to parents, I tell them, that's your child.
Yes.
Spend time with your child, enjoy your child, and that in itself also is therapeutic. For the rest of the community, we need to support each other, whether it's autism, whether it's cancer, whether it's whatever it is, even if it's nothing. Everyone walks their own shoes, and we need to be a community, and we need to support each other through all that.
Yes.
So keeping an open mind. If you see something atypical happening in the environment around you, before judging and jumping to, judge the parent or the child, keep an open mind, ask questions, communicate with each other. Don't assume that you know all, because we all have something to learn from each other and grow together.
Love it. Thank you so much, Pooja. Professor Arasa, from an academic point of view, and today as we recognize World Autism Day, you've already talked about the resources and the expertise that USIU as an institution is able to offer. What are your parting words?
I think for me, my parting shot is let's work together, let's support each other. Let's not neglect anybody, irrespective of who they are, where they come from, where they live, and so on. And once that is done and we practice Ubuntu.
Ubuntu.
Yes.
Love it.
Thank you.
Sanaipe Ntimama, it has been a long time coming, you being on Double O Direct, us discussing autism and the Kal-El program and this amazing collaboration with the University of Nevada for this specific program. What are your parting words?
Never give up. Never give up on your child. Never give up on yourself. Never give up on the community, because it's the community that brings you people like Professor Arasa, Pooja, Dr. Wamithi, and just never give up on whichever faith you have in yourself and in the world. Because I'll tell you something, I have so much faith in my son. My son is going to do amazing things. You guys just watch out. Kal-El, you guys are going to be like Bill Gates, Kal-El, yeah, same thing, same level. I don't mind what he ends up doing, whatever talent he ends up having, but I will push it and push him to achieve the ultimate goal, which is greatness.
Isn't Kal-El Superman's Kryptonian name?
Absolutely. And guess what? I didn't know that when I was naming him.
No.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, they say that a name can actually what is it?
A self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yes, a name is a self-fulfilling prophecy. So
Yes.
I have Superman on my hands.
You have Superman on your hands.
Yeah.
And I'm now curious, if you did not know that Kal-El is
I
Superman's
just liked
Kryptonian-
it. I just liked it. And it's a Maasai name as well.
That I did not know.
It's a Maasai name, and
Yes.
I didn't know that. And then also, in Hebrew, it
Yes.
means the voice of God. So I've got Superman and the voice of God in one little person.
Yes.
So I'm just waiting for greatness to unfold.
Fantastic. I
Yeah.
absolutely love it. Ladies, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining me in Double O Direct. Pooja Panesa, Professor Josephine Arasa, and Sanaipe Ntimama. It's been my absolute pleasure. Have a fantastic weekend.
Thank
Thank you, Olivia.
Spice.